In the year 2032, the world changed overnight when superhumans, demigods, and messiahs began appearing among the population. They possessed powers straight out of a video game and banded together to explore dungeons. These humans with supernatural abilities, who hunted monsters for a living, came to be known as hunters. They fought creatures from other dimensions, becoming incredibly wealthy, but making life harder for ordinary people. As monsters emerged from gates that connected Earth to these dungeons, powerless people died helplessly. Until the hunters arrived, it looked like this event would mark the end of humanity. But saving lives wasn't their goal. They just wanted to hunt, get rich, and grow stronger. Regardless of their motives, they quickly became the main characters of this new world. But for our protagonist, there's no point in being a hero or living in a new world when his own personal world is crumbling. Jun Ha rides the bus in silence, reflecting on what the doctor just told him. He's terminally ill and could die at any moment. His body has become addicted to poison. As he tries to figure out what to do with that diagnosis, his phone rings. It's a call from his older sister. She asks where he is, and he tells her he's in Gay Bong on his way home. She called to let him know she's working overtime and won't be home for a while. It's not the first time she's taken on extra hours. Though Hasten worries she's pushing herself too hard, she doesn't mind. Everything she does is for him. She then asks what the doctor said about his condition. Hasten pauses for a moment and decides to lie. He tells her the results were normal, nothing serious. He can't let her find out he's dying. Worst of all, his illness is something the doctor has never seen before. His entire body has become dependent on poison, and it's a miracle he's still alive. Though he's managed to survive so far, what hits him the hardest is the doctor's certainty. There's no way he'll make it. The old man could only bow his head and apologize. Hasten ends the call and sinks back into despair, but his thoughts are once again interrupted, this time by a loud alarm sounding on everyone's phones. Panic erupts on the bus. Some people wonder if they should evacuate immediately. Hasten checks his phone and sees an emergency alert. A double gate explosion has occurred in Gay Bong. Then it hits him. He's in Gay Bong. He looks out the window and sees giant red eyes staring right at him. A monstrous frog is outside the bus. Its tongue crashes through the window and pierces through a passenger's chest, killing him instantly. The man's wife and the rest of the passengers can only watch in horror as the venom on the creature's tongue slowly kills him. No one can believe what's happening. A deathly silence falls, until everyone's brain catches up, and total chaos breaks out. Some people run from the bus, others try to drag the woman away from her husband's corpse. Elsewhere, at an unnamed company, Hasten's sister Songwa finishes her work and heads for a break with a coworker. They walk toward the break room with hot drinks in hand. The coworker starts the conversation, calling her amazing. She says people her age should be out having fun, not working overtime to pay for a sick brother's hospital bills. Songwa smiles and replies that she disagrees. After all, he's her only family, she has to take care of him. Her coworker falls silent, then chuckles, admiring her dedication. But she doesn't notice the smile fade from Songwa's face, until the mug falls from her hands and shatters on the floor. Songwa is frozen, staring in horror at the news report showing the explosion in Gupadong and Gay Bong. Her beloved brother is there, right now, and he's in danger. Back in Gay Bong, there's nothing but death and destruction. Somehow, Hasten is still alive, but not for long. A monster has grabbed his leg. Everyone who could have helped him is already dead. He has no options left. His phone keeps buzzing with messages from his worried sister, but he has no chance to respond. The monster drags him toward death. Hasten is furious and helpless, but he refuses to die without a fight. He wants to die fighting, hoping they'll give him a Medal of Honor, something that could at least help his sister financially. With no other choice, he grabs a shard of glass nearby, ignoring the cuts on his hands, and prepares to use every last ounce of his strength. He wants to give his all in this final fight against the frog. To him, it's the last gift he can give his sister. He taunts the monster, and it reacts instantly, lifting him into the air, ready to devour him. But Hasten has no intention of becoming its meal. Instead, he wants the creature to feel what it's like to be attacked, just like all the people it killed. The frog tosses him into its mouth, but Hasten uses the moment to stab it in the eye with the glass. The monster roars in pain, thrashes violently, and flings Hasten across the street, knocking him unconscious. When he comes to, still dazed, the monster is staring at him, angrier than ever. Far from being a finishing blow, his attack only enraged the beast. The poisonous frog wraps its massive tongue around Hasten's body, making sure he can't escape. Then it drags him into its mouth and swallows him whole. With nothing else to hold on to, Hasten can only pray that the association will be able to kill the frog. As his body slides down the creature's throat, he wonders if this really is the end. Accepting death, his final thoughts go to his loving sister, who gave everything to care for him. Despite his condition, she always protected him and gave her all. That thought, of the woman who gave her life to make his better, makes him realize he doesn't want to die. At that moment, as the will to survive takes over, something changes inside his body. Outside, the frog suddenly freezes and trembles in pain. Whatever is happening inside Hasten is affecting the monster, too. The creature can't withstand the power surging through it, and with a burst of white light, it explodes. Hasten lands on the ground, completely unharmed. News of the double-gate explosion spreads fast, and massive damage is expected. But instead of focusing on the destruction, the media praises President Gu Gunai for sending a special squad to contain the situation. The response was coordinated by the Glory Guild, the organization in charge of the Gay Bong district. Despite the blood and bodies in the streets, the news is filled with applause for Glory Guild for being the first to respond. As a woman runs desperately through a street full of corpses, the president himself appears, publicly apologizing to the victims. The woman is Songwa, and as she risks her life crossing this urban hell, the president smiles and promises that the Glory Guild will always protect them. Hasten wakes up, covered in monster guts. The last thing he remembers is being swallowed, but somehow, he's still alive. As he stands up and gathers his senses, he hears a familiar voice calling to him. He instantly recognizes it. It's his sister. The voice is weak, but there's no mistaking it, he thinks. Pushing himself to his feet, he wonders why she came to such a dangerous place. Then he runs toward the voice. Songwa calls out desperately, but instead of a response, she hears a sickening sound from a nearby alley. She risks a look, and finds a group of monsters devouring a corpse. She slowly backs away, trying not to make a sound, but steps on a piece of glass. It crunches beneath her foot. Every monster turns its head at once. Panic overtakes her, and she bolts down the empty street, chased by those bloodthirsty beasts. She ends up in a dead-end alley in a destroyed part of town. Tears stream down her face as she thinks of her brother, wondering if she was too late. She tries to hold on to hope, but all she can do now is close her eyes and wait to be eaten. Just as one of the monsters leaps at her, something comes out of nowhere and slams it into the air. Songwa turns toward the source of the attack, and sees Hasten, bloody, furious, and holding a metal pipe. Glory Guild hasn't arrived, so the people have to defend themselves. He tells his sister to get as far away as she can so he can protect her. Under normal circumstances, a regular human fighting monsters would be suicide. But this time, Cheon Hasten feels like he can win. First, the dark frogs around him are physically weak. Their main weapon is poison, they're not strong. Second, for some strange reason, he's stronger. His body hasn't changed physically, but he can feel new power flowing inside him. Third, he remembers what happened while he was unconscious. The giant frog was filled with poison, yet he didn't die. In fact, his wounds started healing. That confirmed it. Poison no longer affects him. His body has changed. All of this gives him the confidence that he can survive, even surrounded by monstrous frogs. But that false confidence makes him drop his guard. A much larger monster sneaks up behind him and slams him with a massive blow. Hasten is sent flying, crashes into a wall, and loses consciousness. Through blurry, aching eyes, he sees his sister, about to be attacked by the same creature that struck him. He was lucky to survive, but it doesn't look like Songwa will be as fortunate. He yells at her to move, but his arm is broken, he can barely move. She can't bear to hear him scream and tells him to stay put. But he doesn't listen. He keeps begging her to run. It's already too late. The monster swings its arm at her. In her final moments, Songwa turns to her brother, and with tears in her eyes says, "I'm sorry." Right before the massive claw slams down, splattering her blood across the street. Someone like her, who gave her life working for him, shouldn't die like this. At least, that's what he believes. But there's nothing he can do to change what's happened. Hasten falls to his knees in shock, asking himself why she gave her life for someone like him. He was going to die anyway, and she had her whole future ahead of her. As rage builds up inside him, Hasten starts to feel something forming around him. It looks like a giant red snake, emerging from his own body and moving as if it obeys him. He doesn't know what it is, but his body knows. The frog must die. The red serpent launches forward, piercing the monster in one blow, killing it instantly. From the rooftop of a building, A woman watches with a smile. The boy summoned a red viper, even though he just awakened. She wonders if he's the one who can finally do what she's been waiting for. But first, he'll need to learn how to control his power. After the shockwave caused by the summoning, all the monsters have started hunting him. She might have to step in and help him deal with the giant frog approaching him, and his sister. Hasten gently lays his injured sister on the ground as a horde of frogs charges at him. Despite the chaos, he's sworn not to let his sister die because of him. She gave her life for him, and he won't let that sacrifice be in vain, no matter what it takes. With new resolve, he covers her with his hood and steps forward with his bare hands. Songwa's breathing is weak, so he doesn't have time to fight them all. He just needs to hold out until the hunters arrive. He locks eyes on the giant frog and prepares to attack. But just as he's about to move, his body gives out. He falls to his knees. He can barely move. It must be a side effect of summoning the serpent. It drained almost all his energy. He struggles to stay conscious as a massive tongue lashes toward him, aiming to kill him in a single blow. Just before it hits him, someone steps in and stops the attack with one hand. While holding the monster's massive tongue, the woman explains that Hasten used up too much energy killing the smaller creatures, pushing his body to the limit. Even so, he managed to take down a black ether monster with a single blow, and that impressed her. Then she introduces herself. Her name is Kirill, and although she has a lot to tell him, she needs to clear the area first. With overwhelming strength, she grabs Hasten by the neck and tosses him like a rag doll, throwing him away from danger. She tells him to go to his sister and wait with her. She'll handle the rest. Kirill turns to face the swarm of monsters. The giant frog launches a powerful attack at her, but she's too fast. She jumps up its arm and appears right in front of its face, ready to strike. The frog snaps its tongue at her, trying to trap her, but she dodges so fast it looks like she teleported. Then she reappears on top of the creature's head and slams it with a devastating punch, crushing it in a burst of gore and blood. Hasten watches in awe as she shows him what it truly means to be an S-rank hunter. If I had even half that strength, my sister wouldn't have gotten hurt, he thinks. His thoughts are cut off when Kirill suddenly reappears beside him and asks what's got him thinking so hard. He lies, saying it's nothing. She smiles gently and tells him, "Your sister is going to be okay." Her words shake him. He looks at her in disbelief as she goes on. If I'd arrived a little later, or if I didn't know how to heal, it would have been too late. But I made it in time. Hearing that his sister will live, after losing all hope, brings him to tears. He turns to look, not a single wound on Songwa. Somehow, this woman who came out of nowhere saved his family's life. As Hasten cries in relief, Kirill tells him it's too soon to be celebrating. After all, you're just like her, she says, and you're still acting like you're already dead. But she assures him he's far from done. What do you mean by that? He asks. She gives him a soft smile and says, I mean, you can live too. She promises to explain everything, after finishing off the rest of the monsters. Kirill turns to walk away, but Hasten stops her. Wait, if you say I can live, does that mean I can become strong like you too? He doesn't want to be a pawn anymore. He doesn't want to rely on others. He wants to be someone who can protect. His words bring a genuine smile to Kirill's face, and as a reward, she decides to show him something cool. She walks toward the stampede of monsters while preparing a special technique, the only one she's given a name. A dark cloud begins to form in her hand. A poisonous mist surrounds her as she utters its name, Venom Rain. The cloud fires a bolt into the sky, making the cloud swirl and turn a deep, ominous violet. As the world reacts to her power, Kirill says, "This is the level you should aim for if you want me to consider you strong." Then it starts to rain. But it's not normal rain. Every drop that falls from the sky makes the monsters scream in agony, melting them away completely. The rain pierces through them and wipes them out without mercy. Hasten watches in awe, realizing how terrifyingly powerful hunters really are. Kirill turns to him and finally answers his question. I promise you, you will become the strongest hunter in the world. Much later, the two return to Hasten's home, where Kirill seems to be testing a strange training method on her new student. For some reason, she's holding him upside down by the ankle, with several poisonous daggers floating around him. Nervously, Hasten asks, Are you sure I'm going to survive this? Is this really your idea of training? Finally, Kirill sets him down and bursts into laughter as he blushes in embarrassment. For a moment, he really thought she was going to kill him, but she can't stop laughing. I never planned to kill you, she says. What I want is to plant something inside you, something called black ether. Hasten frowns, clearly confused. Kirill smiles and begins explaining. Do you know what poisoners are? They used to be pretty famous. In the past, they were one of the highest tier classes in the world of hunters. But after a certain incident, they vanished from public view. Since then, they've been hated by society, branded as traitors to humanity. Kirill, Hasten's mentor, is one of the most infamous villainous poisoners. Hasten quickly apologizes, but she tells him not to worry. After all, he's not exactly wrong. And strangely, he doesn't seem scared of the fact that she's a so-called traitor. Hasten has no reason to fear her. She saved him and his sister. Besides, her power level already gave away that she wasn't just a regular hunter. Kirill confirms it. Poisoners aren't normal. A better word would be special. They awaken with extraordinary abilities. The average hunter's awakening carries a 1% chance of death, which is already rare. But most poisoners die during their awakening, always from the same cause, their own poison. Poisoners live with venom flowing through their bodies, and it grows stronger each day. When it becomes too much to control, it devours them. Hasten realizes the symptoms sound exactly like what he went through. Kirill laughs and confirms it. All that pain was part of his awakening. He is now officially a poisoner. Before he can process it, Kirill drags him outside. She still has a lot to explain, and it's time for a live demo. She takes him to the top of a skyscraper and stops at the edge. Then she asks if he knows how poisoners survive, even with so much venom in their bodies. The answer's simple. They're constantly purifying it. With that, she pulls out a syringe full of poison and stabs it into her chest, injecting herself. A poisoner's healing abilities are far beyond anything a normal person could imagine. Whether asleep, eating, or talking, their bodies are always active, healing and purifying the venom that fuels them. But that's exactly why they can't get rid of it completely. Once purified, the poison becomes their energy source, known as black ether. Nervously, Hasten pulls the syringe out of his own chest and asks if that's really safe. Kirill assures him it's not just safe, it's a gift. He's now officially her student. The next step is figuring out which skills he needs to learn, and she decides to start with mobility. What better way to train it than with one of the poisoner's core skills, a technique called venom steps. Kirill starts teaching him how to use it, but Hasten interrupts her with a question. She said earlier her only named skill was Venom Rain, but now she's mentioning a bunch more. Kirill freezes in embarrassment, and instead of answering, she jumps off to the next building to escape the conversation. She's definitely incredible, but also incredibly stubborn. After an hour of rooftop hopping, Hasten sighs, frustrated. He gives up, thinking he'll never be able to do something that amazing. But those thoughts bring Kirill back. There's no point in giving up before even trying. He'll never know unless he does. Hasten says she doesn't get it. She's already strong. He, on the other hand, has been called every cruel name imaginable for things beyond his control. That's why he's scared. It may sound like an excuse, but it's the truth. Kirill watches him for a moment, her expression unusually serious. Then she makes a decision. Her teaching style was all wrong. She needs to change her approach completely. She warns him, things are about to get much harder, then grabs him by the neck again. The most important thing for him now is to master his senses. If he can focus all of them on the soles of his feet, he can make them explode, launching himself with raw power. With that, she holds him over the edge of the skyscraper, and suddenly lets go. As Hasten plummets towards certain death, Kirill yells for him to plant his feet on the tower wall and jump to the next building. Easier said than done. If he doesn't act fast, he's dead. At the very least, he has to try. Hasten channels all his strength, focusing his senses on the soles of his feet. As he falls, the insults from his past echo in his head. He uses them as fuel to power his energy. There's no point in giving up without a fight. Then, with one push, he plants his feet on the wall and launches himself with explosive force, soaring through the air. He can hardly believe he did it. But now there's a new problem. How to land. Luckily, Kirill appears beside him and reaches out her hand. He thought it was impossible, but now he sees it's not as hard as it seemed. As they float through the air, she pulls him into a hug and tells him, everything's easier when you're willing to die for it. Training resumes after the landing. Kirill stares at him so intensely that Hasten can almost feel it piercing through him. Then things get even stranger. She opens her eye and brings her face dangerously close to his. He tries to scream as Kirill transfers some kind of lens or device from her own eye into his, smiling the whole time with a sinister grin. Once the transfer is complete, along with a bit of physical abuse and psychological trauma, Kirill explains that what she gave him is a piece of advanced equipment used by hunters, though this particular prototype is far more advanced than anything the Glory Guild has ever seen. hunters use all kinds of tools. There are offensive weapons, gathering tools, and storage devices. But this one is a lens, far superior to the usual kind. Hasten appreciates the gear, but thinks there must have been a gentler way to transfer it, right? Still, the fact that she's in such a hurry makes him suspect she's about to leave, and he's absolutely right. She might not show it, but she's currently being hunted, and staying in one place too long is dangerous. In fact, just the time she's spent with him has already put them both at risk. Facing their inevitable parting, she pats him lightly on the head and tells him to find Dr. Jean. He's a genius, and also her partner, and he should be able to explain everything that's still confusing. The lens device will show him the doctor's location. All he has to do is follow it. Finally, she leaves him with one last gift, a sphere pulsing with dark, dangerous energy. With that, she's given him everything she can, and taught him everything she wanted to. Despite how kind and gentle she is, Hasten still doesn't understand why people treat her like a criminal. Before she leaves, he calls out to her, still wondering why she's done so much to help him. Aside from his sister, no one has ever cared this much about him, and he's overwhelmed with gratitude. She's proving to him that she's not a bad person, and that's why he wants to give it his all to help her too. But despite his determination, she turns him down. She tells him he's not strong enough yet to be of any use to her, and for now, he needs to focus on getting stronger. He must grow strong enough to never despair, no matter how powerful his enemies may be. When he reaches the point where he can protect everyone, then he'll be ready to help her. He promises he will. She praises him for his resolve. Judging by the look in her eyes, she knows she doesn't have to worry about him anymore. And with that final exchange, she jumps off the building, leaving him behind. Thanks to her, in a life where he had nothing, he finally has a goal. The next day, the news is flooded with reports about the devastation in Daebangdong. Gupadong, a wealthier, more privileged area, was successfully defended, but the Glory Guild completely ignored Daebangdong. Naturally, public outrage followed. Stories of their negligence went viral online. Thousands of comments flooded in, ranging from harsh insults to heartfelt sympathy. And while the debates raged for days, some began speaking in defense of the Glory Guild. Suddenly, all the criticism disappeared, replaced by praise. They were hailed as heroes. No one is more furious about this than Hasten as he gets dressed. After all, he was directly affected by the incident. He almost died. There's only so much a person can take before snapping. Instead of dwelling on it, he heads toward the location marked by his lens, leaving a note for his sister saying he'll be back in a few days. As he walks, he takes a moment to examine the orb Kirill gave him. It looks like a core, probably from the giant toad, but he has no idea what to do with it. She told him to hold it in both hands and remember what it felt like to use poisonous steps. Almost immediately, something begins to happen. The core starts being absorbed into his body, and a notification pops up on his lens display, showing how much of the core he's absorbed. Eventually, he absorbs it fully. The status window shows how much black ether he now has. It's measured in units called BA. His meter has gone from 1 to 1.5 BA. If he keeps absorbing more, he might get stronger. But right now, he has no clue how strong he really is. The lens responds, informing him that he's currently at the level of an E-rank knight. However, if he continues absorbing black ether and breaks through a certain threshold, he'll eventually gain the powers of an S-rank knight. Looks like Kirill wasn't exaggerating when she said he could become the world's strongest hunter. Before he can process all that new information, he arrives at a checkpoint and notices an argument nearby. A man is yelling at a frightened woman holding an injured child. She seems to be trying to reach a hospital, but the checkpoint appeared out of nowhere, with no prior warning. She argues with the man while the child trembles in her arms, but that only makes the man raise his voice even more and threaten her with violence. The child starts crying as the man continues shouting and throwing insults, calling them beggars despite the situation. That's too much for Hasten, and he finally steps in. He calls the man disgusting for acting so arrogantly in a situation like this, especially when none of these officials were anywhere to be found when the gate first broke open. The man turns his anger toward our protagonist, and walks toward him menacingly. It's almost laughable how the people who weren't there when things were truly dangerous are now trying to enforce control. Enraged, the man pulls out a bat and asks Hasten if he knows who he's talking to. But with the large emblem on his vest, it's impossible not to recognize him. Everyone in Korea knows the symbol on his shirt. It's the emblem of the Glory Guild. The man moves in to intimidate Hasten, and it's even worse that he's saying all this while fully aware of who he is. But Hasten doesn't back down. He dares him to try and hit him. This will be the first fight Hasten starts since awakening. As the man raises the bat to teach him a lesson, Hasten realizes he's scared. But just because he's scared doesn't mean he's going to run away when he needs to fight. He catches the bat mid-swing and effortlessly breaks it with his bare hands. That's when the man realizes, far too late, that he's made a huge mistake. Cheon Hasten had never worked out before, and as he threw a punch, his stance was unstable and his breathing uneven. There was no doubt it was the punch of a rookie with zero fighting experience. But a metahuman's body is on a whole different level than that of a normal person, and even with weak form, he was still strong enough to knock the man out with a single hit. As the man lay on the ground, he started whimpering, asking for help. Hasten couldn't help but mock him for whining after just one hit, especially after acting so tough before. When the gates burst open, people were also crying out for help, but no one came. Everyone kept waiting, convinced the Glory Guild would save them, but they never showed up. Hasten soon realized he was wasting his time on someone who wouldn't listen and turned around to leave. The woman couldn't help but stare at him in awe as he walked through the gate, completely unfazed by what had just happened. After a long walk, Hasten finally arrived at the location his tracker had been guiding him to. There was only a simple phone booth in an area so remote it was hard to believe anyone ever used it. Hasten picked up the receiver and held it to his ear, but it didn't even seem to be working. Then he pressed a hidden button beneath the handset, and the booth let out a loud buzzing sound. Next thing he knew, a trapdoor opened beneath his feet and he fell hard onto the floor of a strange white room. If he weren't a metahuman, that fall would have definitely killed him. But his troubles were far from over. He looked around the room and spotted a closed door to his left. That was probably the entrance, but he couldn't be sure where to go. One thing was certain. This Dr. Jean was no ordinary person. He tried to push himself up with one hand, but ended up splashing into a strange liquid. He touched his face and realized the liquid was blood. Before he could wonder if he was in the wrong place, a loud alarm blared around him. The system announced the activation of base defense mode as several weapons dropped from the ceiling, all aimed directly at him. Hasten panicked briefly, and the weapons released a strange poisonous gas that filled the room, forcing him to cover his nose. He wondered why Dr. Jean was doing this, especially since he was supposedly a close friend of Kirill's. His mind raced as he accidentally inhaled some of the gas. But then he remembered, he was a poisoner. Poison didn't affect him. In fact, breathing the toxic fumes felt oddly refreshing. Then he heard footsteps approaching. On the other side of the door, a masked man peered into the venom-filled room. Anyone inside should be dead, so he opened the door to check. The moment he stepped in, Hasten tackled him to the ground and pinned him down, ready to beat him senseless. But before he could even begin, he realized the man had already passed out from the first hit. Later, Hasten explained how he got there. The man understood once he heard that Kirill had sent him. But what really bothered him was being tied up. The ropes were tight, and he was running out of breath. Hasten still didn't fully trust the man and was afraid he'd pull something the moment he was free. But Dr. Jean assured him everything was fine. In fact, those traps were designed specifically to kill anyone who wasn't a poisoner. Anyone else would have died just from breathing in the gas. Hasten wasn't impressed and asked the bigger man to quit joking around. Since the place was built to keep normal people out, only hunters, or Kirill, could ever make it into the lab. Jean was a pretty capable scientist, and a lot of people had needed his help. He'd been through tough times when he was younger but managed to survive those days. Despite being such an important doctor and scientist, people came after him for his achievements. Assassins from other countries, members of shady organizations, even hunters from the association tried to kill him. They probably wanted his money or his technical skills. At first, he tried to hold out and survive, but over time, it became harder and harder to trust people. Even the ones sent to protect him ended up betraying him. Eventually, for his own safety, he stopped meeting others altogether. His growing paranoia led him to hide in the safe zone and build a trap room to keep out anyone who came for him. There's no innocent blood down here. Everyone who makes it this far has questionable motives. Hasten sighed, and although he still felt wary, he decided to untie the man. The doctor had been nice to him so far, so there was no reason to act hostile. Besides, Jean trusted him because he was someone Kirill had sent. If he trusted Kirill, he could trust Hasten too. That day, when he was at his lowest and on the brink of death, that girl approached him with an umbrella and tried to help. Now that he met Hasten, he couldn't help but notice the similarities. They even had the same marks on their skin. It was almost funny how like master and student were. Hasten didn't see it that way. To him, the only thing they had in common was that they were both poisoners. Dr. Jean explained that they were also alike in how they followed their own path. He revealed that Kirill had also had dark purple marks on her skin when she was young. That surprised Hasten. Kirill was so beautiful now. The doctor sighed and said it was better to just explain everything instead of rambling on. The two of them began walking to another part of the lab, and the doctor asked Hasten what he thought about the poison in his body. He didn't know much about it, so the doctor explained, just a single drop of his poison blood was strong enough to kill a rank A knight. It was so powerful, no chemical weapon ever created could compare. Hasten knew that when a hunter reaches rank A, most attacks become useless against them. But a single drop of his blood could kill someone that strong. Dr. Jean brought him back to the moment, and told him that while his power was impressive, it was meaningless if he couldn't control it. For now, he needed to train, otherwise he'd become a walking disaster. With that, Dr. Jean showed him a room full of training gear and materials he could use to grow stronger. The scars on his body were a sign that he couldn't yet control his poison, so he'd have to master it if he ever wanted them to fade naturally. The doctor promised Hasten that he was the one who trained Kirill, and once their training was over, he'd be unrecognizable. With the explanation over, Dr. Jean got straight to the point, and told him to get to work. As Hasten trained hard, the doctor kept pushing him, refusing to let him slack off and constantly ramping up the intensity. Even though they'd only been working together a short time, Hasten could already lift weights that would cripple an average man. By the 7th day of training, several changes had taken place. First, the doctor finally took off his gas mask, probably a sign that he's starting to trust our protagonist. The first time Hasten saw his face without the mask, he barely recognized him. The second change was that his sister woke up, and totally freaked out when she couldn't find him nearby. Of course, she scolded him harshly for leaving her alone and disappearing to who knows where, but despite everything, she decided to trust him. The third change was a new device, built to support his growth as a hunter. One day, Dr. Jean handed him a new tool, a refined version of the one Kirill had given him. The doctor designed and built it in just 3 days. But the biggest change was Hasten himself. After training, his body went through a dramatic transformation. Not only were his spots noticeably lighter, but he also developed impressive muscle mass in a short time. The change was so sudden, it surprised even him and the doctor. He gained a powerful physique and a striking face practically overnight, to the point where Dr. Jean almost felt jealous. As training continued, Hasten asked the doctor if he ever got bored living in an underground bunker. After all, he'd been down there alone for who knows how long. It's a miracle he didn't go insane. Dr. Jean corrected him. He wasn't alone. He had a little companion who'd been resting on Hasten's shoulder the entire time. Hasten looked down at his shoulder and for the first time, noticed a small dragon sleeping there. His name was Pori, and though he was a poisonous monster, he was harmless and friendly. Even if he bit someone, it would only cause mild itching. He also had the ability to absorb poison from his master, and had been clinging to Hasten's shoulder for 2 days. Despite all his training and heightened senses, Hasten hadn't noticed him, because Pori could turn invisible. Invisibility is one of the rarest powers out there, even among top-tier players, so it was clear Pori wasn't an ordinary creature. Still, Hasten didn't have time to dwell on it. Dr. Jean ordered him back to training. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a secretary reported his findings to his superior at the Glory Guild HQ. Guild President Gu Gunai gave the necessary orders after hearing the report, but one thing in particular caught his attention. Rumors about the Bangdong incident still hadn't died down. He'd rather never hear about that annoying mess again. The secretary nervously promised to make the reports disappear, after a persuasive warning from the president, and was about to leave. But Gu Gunai called him back and asked about a woman named Maria. The secretary grew even more nervous and hesitated to answer. But his reaction said it all. Maria had locked herself in the healing chamber again. The president's suspicions were confirmed. Maria was sitting on the floor, silently crying as she repeatedly cut her own arms, mumbling apologies to no one in particular. The healing chamber was one of the Glory Guild's many secrets, a private room where Maria would self-harm without end. She went there whenever the crushing guilt of failing to protect others became too much. Most of her wounds would have been fatal to anyone else, but Maria's healing ability was so powerful, she regenerated instantly. While she wept on the floor, the president tried to comfort her, saying there was nothing they could have done to save those who died. But Maria didn't listen. She reminded him that over 500 innocent people had lost their lives. She told him they had no right to say they did their best when that many lives were lost. Gu Gunai sighed and rubbed his forehead. They'd had this conversation countless times, and he always told her the same thing. Nothing could have been done differently. She asked if things would have changed if she'd gone with the rescue team. Maybe they could have split up, and even if they were late, they might have saved at least one more life. The thought of her failure made her cry again, and Gu Gunai had to remind her. The monster that appeared in Gabangdong was a disaster-level threat. No one even knew who managed to kill it so easily. But one thing was certain, they wouldn't have stood a chance. That thought made Gu Gunai cry, a single tear rolling down his cheek. After all, he was the one making decisions, so if anyone was to blame, it was him. Maria froze in shock, seeing her leader break down and take all the blame. At least, that's what she thought was happening. In reality, this was the same routine he went through every time Maria spiraled, and he was sick of it. But the plan worked, and Maria immediately shifted from self-blame to comforting him. As soon as her mood changed, he offered to take her to the next hunter exam site. After all, they needed to recruit more talent. Bringing in more people meant having a chance to save more innocent lives. Maria perked up, and the president took the opportunity to focus on something else that had been bothering him. The person who defeated the monster in Gabangdong was insanely strong. He had to figure out who it was. Back in Dr. Jin's lab, Hasten continued his strength training. The doctor took the chance to ask what he planned to do after training was over. Hasten's answer was obvious. He wanted to become a hunter, but instead of becoming a knight, he actually wanted to be a healer. Ironically, his goals lined up with the man who once put his life at risk. For starters, Gu Gunai also believed the world needed more talented healers. Hasten wanted to save lives. Meanwhile, Gu Gunai was more focused on the fact that skilled healers were rare and his guild needed them to treat injured members. Because of that, the two were bound to clash at the next hunter exam site. With his goals set and training complete, it was time for Hasten to say goodbye to Dr. Jean. The two shook hands, and the doctor admitted he'd grown fond of his student in such a short time. Then he added that Pori would be going with him, and they exchanged a final farewell as Jean told the little dragon to look after Hasten. As soon as Hasten got home, he was greeted by his very angry sister. She put him in a headlock and yanked on his ear while he tried desperately to explain himself. Eventually, he got a word in, and though she still wasn't happy, she wasn't as mad anymore. Still, she was skeptical about the person who supposedly saved him. Her age was unknown, and he had no clue who she was or what organization she was part of. Kirill might not even be her real name. Normal hunters were expected to help civilians, but Kirill went way beyond that, and it seemed like she had some hidden agenda. Despite her doubts, Hasten defended his mentor. He was sure Kirill wasn't a bad person. His sister gave him one last piece of advice. The time might come when he'd have to repay Kirill for everything she did, and when that time came, it might be more than he could handle. But putting that aside, the bigger topic was that Hasten wanted to become a hunter. He looked away nervously, expecting her to disapprove, but to his surprise she told him to go for it. If that's what he really wanted, she'd support him. Hasten bowed his head in gratitude. That was just how Songwa had always been. She didn't want another incident like Gabangdong to happen again. He wanted to become a hunter so he could save people, just like someone had saved him. Despite the dangers, Songwa fully supported his dream, even saying he'd become a greater hunter than anyone else. Hasten found it funny that the two people he trusted most had said the exact same thing. Now, with her blessing, she casually told him that the exam fee was 50 million won. Suddenly, she didn't seem as supportive anymore, suggesting maybe he should work in a small factory instead. Hasten reassured her. He had a way to get the money. And no, despite what she might think, it didn't involve selling an organ. His plan was to enter a place hunters regularly visited, dungeons that appear randomly across the world, filled with monsters, and treasures that could make dreams come true. This particular dungeon was a poison type, one of the most infamous kinds. It was so toxic that barriers had been set up around it to try and contain the spread. But the bigger the containment zone got, the more problems seemed to follow. Now standing in front of the gate, there was no turning back. Hasten took a deep breath and stepped through the swirling purple door. What lay beyond was a whole new world. It was so surreal, it almost felt like a video game, and as expected, the air was thick with poison. Other hunters wouldn't even be able to breathe in there. But that didn't concern him. Right now, his goal was to find a rare plant he could sell to cover the exam fee. As he walked through the toxic landscape, he eventually faced his first obstacle, a venomous Komodo dragon, deadly and classified as an E rank in physical strength, with a 2-star danger rating. It also had a D rank and secondary traits, like elemental powers or telekinesis. In short, it was dangerous because of its poison. But since Hasten didn't have to worry about that, he should have had the upper hand. He should have, but instead of confidence, he was paralyzed with fear. His hands trembled violently, and nothing he did could calm himself. Every instinct screamed at him to run. The trauma from Gay Bong surged back into his mind. Then, just when he felt like he might break, Pori appeared in front of him. The little dragon looked up at him with concern. That was enough to snap Hasten out of it. He regained control. He dug into his pocket, searching for the device the doctor had given him. As he fumbled around, the monsters noticed him and started charging from the bushes. He counted to 3 as they rushed in, and more just kept coming. Luckily, he found the device just in time. That gave him enough confidence to face whatever came next. He remembered when the doctor first gave it to him. He'd explained it was a weapon that would take the form he needed most in the moment. All he had to do was hold it and command it to activate. With that memory in mind, he gripped it tightly and gave the command. The box's functionality was limitless, and it reacted to his ether to grow stronger. Its name was Yacha. As it shifted form and transformed into a sharper weapon, Hasten couldn't help but marvel at the invention created by the world's smartest scientist, Dr. Jean. Yacha turned into a gleaming dagger, and as he held it, Hasten knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. As monsters lunged from the bushes, he activated the first skill his mentor had taught him. He raised his hand and summoned poison rain, just as one of the lizards lunged for a bite. The toxic liquid fell from the sky, and just a single drop caused the nearest lizard to explode. The others didn't even have time to react before being wiped out by the poisonous storm. As he walked through the scattered remains of the monsters, Hasten was more worried about how his sister would react to the blood on his shirt than the beasts in the forest. But it was all worth it. He absorbed the black ether from the fallen monsters. This place was practically a buffet. As he dashed toward the next corpse, he realized a dungeon like this was made for someone like him. After absorbing the ether from the last corpse, his total reaches 50 BA. If he keeps going, he could collect up to 300 BA before heading home. Hasten has become so powerful in such a short time that he can hardly believe it. Ether varies greatly depending on the user's strength, but this is unreal. The wounds he inflicted on the lizards were just small cuts, yet they all died before they could even resist. That makes X a weapon capable of eliminating enemies in an instant. With his current growth, he might have reached the highest class and even surpassed Kirill. Excited, he quickly opens his status window to see how much he's improved. He's not expecting an S rank, but a B or A would be satisfying. Instead, his newly upgraded lens device, called V1, tells him he's currently Class E in physical strength, but has an S rating in healing abilities. It's a bit disappointing, but he doesn't mind being just Class E. He plans to become a healer anyway. At least, that's what he tells himself to feel better. In truth, he's so disappointed he starts wondering if he should just head home. He didn't even find the special flower he came here for. As he considers his next steps, a wave of murderous intent stops him cold. He turns toward the source, ready to face something dangerous. From the aura alone, he knows this monster is on a completely different level from anything he's faced before. From the darkness of the forest, a corrupted, deadly hyena approaches. He doesn't even need V1's analysis to know its way out of his league physically. It's Class C in physical strength, and Class B in other stats. This hyena must be the dungeon boss. Even though Hasten's poison is stronger, the monster's physical level is 2 tiers above his. The power gap is enormous, but even so, there's still a chance he could win. The monster doesn't waste time and strikes fast. It dashes to Hasten's blind spot, then appears behind him faster than he can react, slashing his arm and sending him crashing to the ground. Hasten wonders if this will be the place where he dies. The hyena is far stronger, and he couldn't track its movements at all. But he can't give up now. There's no way he'll die after surviving death so many times. He forces himself to stand and notices that the hyena isn't attacking again. It stands still, waiting patiently for the poison to spread through his body, a small grin on its face. That only makes Hasten angrier, but it also gives him a chance to win. The hyena's arrogance will be its downfall. Hasten provokes the beast to attack again, and it rushes in. First, he needs to wear it down, then rely on his high-level healing to outlast any damage it can inflict. Every poison user controls the toxins in their body through powerful healing, but once the poison is perfectly managed, that healing can be redirected to treat other wounds, which is why poison users can also be some of the best healers. Dr. Jean taught him this, and now Hasten must use that knowledge to survive. The hyena bites hard into his arm, and he throws his dagger to force it back. With a plan now in motion, he activates the third device Dr. Jean gave him, his secret weapon. The circulator allows him to better control the poison in his body, meaning he can heal faster and more efficiently. Thanks to this, his arm heals instantly, and he's ready for round 2. They clash again in the poison-filled field, and somehow, he keeps up with the monster's speed. Still, it doesn't stop him from getting injured again and again. While healing, he notices the hyena doesn't seem all that concerned. There's no end in sight to this fight. Maybe he underestimated Class C's physical ability. They've been fighting for an hour, and the hyena shows no signs of slowing down. The beast jumps again, and Hasten has to use poison steps to avoid being sliced in two. Each attack cuts deep, and the entire time, he hasn't been able to land a proper hit. Even though it seems hopeless, he's slowly adapting to the monster's movements. It's slow and unfair, but the battle doesn't feel as impossible as it did in the beginning. The hyena is arrogant, but that's because it understands the importance of spirit in battle. If Hasten shows weakness, he'll be torn apart immediately, so he keeps pushing forward. Even when the hyena smashes him into a forest of trees, he keeps getting back up. He's barely hanging on, and the hyena is too relaxed, waiting for him to stand again. It's obvious it's not even fighting seriously yet. Hasten remembers what Kirill once told him: never despair, no matter how powerful your enemy is. If someone as strong as her were to fear an opponent, that enemy must be unimaginably strong. He made a promise to Kirill that he'd become that strong, so he can't give up now. The hyena rushes him with a flurry of blows, moving so fast he can barely react. He just has to endure and keep healing until the enemy gets tired. It's the only way he'll survive. At this point, all he can do is hope for a miracle, just like the last time he summoned the Red Viper. Dr. Jean once told him that the Viper was far too strong, and it was a miracle he survived its summoning. Now, he must hope for that same miracle again, and eventually it comes. V1 alerts him that his black ether is changing, triggered by fighting an opponent far stronger than himself. Thanks to the relentless fight and his refusal to give in, his physical level rises from Class E to Class D. This is the miracle he's been hoping for all along, and that slight boost in power is all he needs to take control of the fight. He activates poison steps once more and immediately notices the difference. He's faster, stronger, and sharper than ever. Even the hyena stumbles back, shocked by the sudden spike in his strength. But even if he's stronger now and the hyena is exhausted, it's still Class C, which means it's still above him. But he only needs to land a single hit. This is his last shot, and if he goes beyond that, he won't be able to control his own poison. Hasten abandons all defense and pours everything into a single sharp attack. It's a gamble, but all he has to do is land one strike. He lowers his body and adopts a menacing stance, hoping to channel his new speed and power. Then, he bursts forward with a powered-up poison step, closing the gap in an instant. Turns out, all the suffering was worth it. The hyena was so tired it didn't even react to his strike. The blade hits perfectly, and the hyena's head goes flying. Now that the battle is finally over, he can start worrying about the real boss. The one who might kill him for ruining his clothes. His older sister. With the boss defeated, he hopes the next dungeon will be at least a little easier, but his troubles are far from over. Something is watching him from the shadows. He walks home shirtless while people on the street stare and whisper. It's humiliating, and to make things worse, he runs into the woman he saved at the Gabangdong checkpoint. She tries to thank him for saving her life, but he's so embarrassed he pretends he doesn't know her. And just like he expected, his sister gives him a brutal beating when he gets home. The one-sided assault is so intense he ends up with a broken spine. The experience is so humiliating that he bursts into tears just thinking about it the next day. But there's no time to dwell on yesterday's shame. He's in another dungeon, currently running from a giant spider trying to kill him. It slams him into a wall, but he's more worried about getting his clothes dirty than anything else. Luckily, the monster knocked him right where he needed to be. He finally found the mysterious bronze sunflower he's been searching for. The flower changes color based on the dungeon's difficulty. Bronze means easy, silver is normal, and gold is the hardest. He found the lowest tier 1, bronze. Even though it's not as valuable as the others, it can still easily sell for at least 10 million. Higher tiers can go up to 50 million. The reason is that the flower has special traits that make it incredibly useful. It holds the healing power of an S-rank healer. Even the bronze sunflower has impressive healing properties. They say the gold sunflower can perform miracles. However, those only grow in poison dungeons near boss rooms, making them extremely hard to reach. They also have the annoying trait of withering as soon as the boss dies. That's why he's running from the giant spider instead of fighting it, even though it's way weaker than the hyena he fought earlier. First, he needs to subdue the boss before going after the flower. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the power to do that. His skills are either extremely destructive or focused on healing. V1 informs him there's another option. Yacha has a non-lethal mode called White Sleep, which can put enemies to sleep or completely paralyze them. Dr. Jean made it specifically for people like Hasten, those with strong attack power who need a special way to subdue opponents. It's the perfect tool for this. What's more urgent is that V1 didn't mention this sooner. Apparently it's because he never asked, and the lens seems to have a sarcastic sense of humor. Hasten is annoyed but decides to ignore the snark and focus on taking the spider down. He taunts the spider, which charges at him. Hasten is ready and slashes it just as it passes. White Sleep works exactly as described, instantly putting the spider to sleep. With the dungeon boss unconscious, Hasten is finally able to collect the flower in peace, except for Pori, who shows up and looks heartbroken when told he can't eat it. Holding his prize, Hasten remembers the people who encouraged him to find the flower in the first place. They told him he had to get both flowers and earn as much money as possible. Leaving the dungeon, he heads to sell the sunflower. He can't sell it normally since the association has restrictions on items like this. So, he heads to the underground economic center, basically the Hunter Black Market. As soon as he arrives, he notices suspicious people giving him wary looks. He tells Pori to buy anyone who tries anything funny. Even the black market vendors glare at him, and some outright try to force their products on him. The whole place is a mess, and people are eyeing him like prey, probably because he looks weak. The black market is definitely a gathering spot for shady folks, and it feels like they could jump him at any moment. But now everyone's attention has shifted to something much more exciting. A huge, muscular Class D knight is about to challenge a slim-looking Class D knight. If they were normal people, the bigger guy would definitely win, but since they're hunters, things work very differently. The skinny guy ignores the taunts, grabs the bigger man by the neck, and looks ready to finish him in one blow. Even though in real fights victory can depend on hidden skills and insane advantages, the higher-level person always has the upper hand. The match and the cheering crowd make it clear to Hasten that the black market is a lawless zone, and if someone walks in without a weapon, it's normal for people to assume they're weird or defenseless. Luckily, even though he's low-level, no one's approached him yet, so he can move around pretty freely. As he walks, he spots a scanning device being sold at one of the booths. It's way worse than his V1 lens. It can't even properly detect an opponent's level. Still, the price is insanely high. He thinks it's overpriced, but someone else walks by, calls it a steal, and buys it immediately. That just shows how spoiled Hasten is by the doctor's incredible tech. But that's not his concern right now. His main goal is to find a shop that deals with the sunflower in his bag. He asks Pori to scout ahead using stealth, but when he gets no response, he realizes Pori is nowhere in sight. Then he hears someone scream, and finds Pori biting a red-haired girl. He rushes over to stop him as the little dragon keeps pestering the girl. But that turns out to be a mistake. She smacks his hand away and dashes into the crowd. As she runs off, she activates a stealth skill and disappears right in front of his eyes. And just like he feared, she took his bag too. The girl hides in a back alley, thinking she got away. She noticed he put the bronze sunflower in a plain black plastic bag and saw the perfect opportunity to snatch it. Unfortunately for her, she messed with the wrong person. Hasten is already standing right in front of her before she can even react. And unfortunately for her again, Hasten heard every word she said, and he's not happy. His intimidating aura makes her shrink back in fear, and he demands she return the bag. Realizing she can't win a fight, she agrees to give it back, but proposes a deal instead. It's painfully obvious he has no clue where to sell the sunflower, and she has the knowledge he needs. She was born and raised in the black market, so she knows all the twisted streets and shady vendors. She also knows places most people wouldn't dare enter, like the ones dealing in sunflowers. Since it's a restricted item and extremely rare, not many know it even exists. But she can recommend a place that handles it properly. In return, they'll split the profits. She gets 40%, he gets 60%. Hasten's annoyed. She seems to be underestimating him. She doesn't seem like a bad person, and he doesn't want to fight her, but she needs a lesson for messing with him. He lets his venomous ether leak out, creating a threatening aura that makes her instinctively back off. Then he tells her he was going to just scare her, but now it looks like he'll have to kill her instead. She tries to call his bluff, saying he'd never find her if she went into hiding, but then he reminds her that she was bitten by his familiar. The bite doesn't do anything except make you itchy, but she doesn't know that. He tells her Pori's venom could kill an S-rank knight, and the little dragon acts all tough to sell the lie. In the black market, losers are fools, and to be a winner, you've gotta look strong. With his threatening aura and the looming threat of death by poison, he's managed to scare her enough to stop her from resisting. With no other option, the girl bursts into tears and begs for her life. Looks like the intimidation worked a little too well, but with her stealth skill, if he hadn't done that, she might have slipped away again and led him on a wild goose chase. Now that the worst is over, he introduces himself, and the trembling girl introduces herself as Baisu, the daughter of the black market. Now that they're friends, Hasten tells her to be his guide and take him to the place where he can sell the sunflower. Baisu takes him to a crazy-looking man who introduces himself as Yacha, the strongest man in the black market, known by everyone as Father. Hasten can barely hide his disgust while trying to strike a deal with Yacha. It's kind of weird that the final boss showed up just for a simple transaction. But since Baisu, his daughter, brought Hasten, Yacha must have thought it was worth checking out. Even though he calls her his daughter, he doesn't seem the least bit concerned that she brought in a stranger. Father just grins and reminds Hasten that the rules here are simple. The loser is the fool. If she gets herself killed, he's not going to care. The black market's ruthless attitude throws Hasten off balance. It doesn't help that the man's been eating raw monster meat the entire time they've been talking. Just proves Yacha's just as much a monster as the dungeon beasts he fights. Still, that's not his concern. He gets back to the reason he came, selling the bronze sunflower for a good price. Yacha's clearly interested. There's been a shortage, and on top of that, Hasten has a high-grade one. Father seems like a decisive guy, so they should be able to work something out. Or so Hasten thinks, until Father releases a venomous hyena, the same beast that nearly killed him in his first dungeon. Yacha still isn't totally convinced Hasten's being honest. After all, he somehow got his hands on a rare item that even the Hunter Association struggles to obtain. So if Hasten got it himself, he must have beaten a dungeon boss, meaning he should be able to handle a venomous hyena too. His logic checks out, and Hasten wastes no time, knocking out the hyena before Yacha can even blink. With that, the deal is sealed, and Hasten tells Yacha to name his price. That finally gets Yacha's full attention, and the negotiation begins. Baisu tries to tell Hasten to show some respect when talking to her father, but Yacha cuts her off, warning her to know her place, and the room fills with a deadly aura. Hasten can barely move under the pressure, but then realizes it's not just pressure, it's killing intent. Just because his daughter interrupted, this insane guy released bloodlust so intense it left a cut on Hasten's cheek. It makes him even more confused about just how powerful this man actually is. Baisu's having just as rough a time. She gets blown away completely by the force. Yacha wastes no time and gets back to the deal. He starts the bidding at 60 million, and that completely changes Hasten's opinion of him. Our protagonist takes the deal immediately, and even scolds Baisu in his mind for trying to steal when she's got such an amazing dad. With the deal done and Hasten ignoring the strange vibe between him and Yacha, it's time to leave the black market. He heals Baisu, who still believes Pori's bite was fatal and is amazed at how quickly she recovered. Then Hasten reveals the bite wasn't dangerous at all, and she was never going to die. Meaning all that crying was for nothing, and she tries to get revenge by punching Hasten, but he easily dodges. Black market rules say losers are fools, and she was just too naive. Hasten uses her sloppy punches to make his escape, telling her not to steal next time if she doesn't want to get outplayed. After he leaves, Yacha asks Baisu if she was actually healed completely. She says yes, but the scar is still fresh on her face. Then he turns his attention to the black ether on the ground. Yacha picks it up and finds it sticky and repulsive. When he hit Hasten with killing intent earlier, their ethers clashed, and he noticed the kid's ether was surprisingly potent. It reminds him of a time in his youth when someone shattered his will so badly that he begged for death. The woman refused, and kept telling him to get up and fight her, all while grinning arrogantly. Hasten's ether reminds him of that woman, and it brings back some very unpleasant memories. Back home, Songwa gets Hasten ready for his trip to the Hunter Association. Thanks to the money from selling the bronze sunflower, he was able to pay the registration fee for the Hunter exam. Now his sister is trying to clean him up and make him look better so he'll make a good impression on the judges. That would be fine if he were actually taking the exam, but he's only registering for it. And even though he looks great, There's really no need to go this far just to register. He heads to the Hunter Association building, and on his way, two guys notice him as he passes by. One of them comments that he looks pretty weak and wonders why someone like that would be taking the hunter exam. It's really immature to judge a hunter by their looks. But the guy can't help feeling disgusted when he sees Hasten. What they don't know is Hasten heard every word and swears to remember their faces no matter what. When he becomes a hunter, he'll make sure never to heal them, no matter what. But their comments remind him of the spots on his skin. He thought they had improved, but they still look pretty bad. When he hands over his registration form, the woman at the counter finishes the paperwork quickly and tells him to leave as soon as possible. Even she seems disgusted by his appearance. He takes the document and turns to leave, but the fact that she keeps her scornful expression as he walks away annoys him. She calls the next person, who's more focused on Hasten than on approaching the counter. He's also bothered that Hasten is registering and feels that someone who looks as weak as him just lowers the standards. The women at the counter recognize him as someone named Yuji Wonnim. He smiles and tells them not to let anyone know they saw him there. Apparently, he's someone famous and doesn't want anyone to know he's still applying to become a hunter. The girls are excited to see him and promise not to reveal to anyone that he was there. Outside the area, with Hasten's application completed, it's time for him to go home. As he leaves the building, he notices someone outside protesting alone. She's holding a sign about the guild glory and how they abandoned Gabangdong. Although it was a massive disaster, protests have become much less frequent lately. Someone hurriedly tells the woman she has to leave before the police arrive. Hasten watches them, and wonders if he could have done something to save the people of Gabangdong if he had awakened earlier. The woman gets more erratic when told to leave the area. She grabs the man's shirt and cries loudly for her dead son, while the man tries to get her to back off. If Hasten had woken up earlier, this woman wouldn't have to protest on this scale. This is the third day she's come to protest alone, and at this rate, she'll collapse if she keeps it up. Hasten can't help clenching his fists in anger, as the woman pleads to meet the association president just once, and her requests are denied. The commotion breaks when a more violent man arrives to join the conversation. He's the one who sent the earlier man to end the woman's protest, but now seems to have to come in person. The guy's name is Nam Kitak, an E-rank knight affiliated with the association. He pushes his subordinate aside and approaches the woman with a dangerous look. Something about his behavior makes Hasten very uncomfortable. He threatens the woman, saying he already warned her to stop what she's doing, but she keeps ignoring him. Then he raises his fist while the woman trembles in fear and tells his subordinate that if he wants anyone to listen, he should make his actions short and decisive. With that, he swings his hand at the woman with full force, his fist hitting something and kicking up dust. He continues his lecture, telling the woman she should have listened from the start, and that her constant ignoring is what forced him to take drastic measures. But it looks like he'll have to give her another lesson because someone stopped his fist before it could hit the poor woman. Hasten couldn't just sit by and watch an innocent woman get attacked by an arrogant guy like that. His anger is clear on his face as he grabs the man's hand tighter. Nam Kitak withdraws his hand completely, unfazed by the sudden challenger, and tells him to get out of the way so he can do his job. Hasten ignores his words and tells him to stay still if he doesn't want to get his head bitten off. He can't stand the idea of a hunter affiliated with the association using his power against a civilian. The man argues he's just doing official work and asks, who does Hasten think he is to interrupt? Hasten doesn't want to hear any of it, and reveals he's an incoming hunter, as he unleashes his ether. That makes Nam Kitak even angrier, and he orders Hasten to retract his ether before things get serious, revealing his own ether with a fiery aura. The two look ready to fight, and the woman tries to calm things down before it gets worse. Hasten assures her there's no need to worry, he'll always win, and that only makes Nam Kitak angrier. He prepares to fight, but that breaks Hasten's command not to move. Our protagonist is more than happy to show him the consequences of his actions as he grabs him by the face before he can react. Then he slams him to the ground. With just one attack, the man is already trembling and barely able to gather the strength to get up. But even so, he swears he'll kill Hasten as his rage over being humiliated like this builds. In response, Hasten crouches next to him and lists all of his abilities right in his face. Nam Kitak's courage vanishes as he hears all his skills named like a blacklist. Then Hasten gets close to his face, removes the badge from his neck, and warns him that his abilities aren't meant to threaten people, they're meant to protect them. Civilians are the ones who need protection, not the guild glory.